What does it feel like to kiss a woman? When my straight roommate asked me that question on a rainy October night, I knew my carefully constructed world was about to collapse. She doesn't know I've been destroyed before by someone who was just curious. She doesn't know that 3 years ago, I learned loving a woman could shatter you in ways you never recover from. She doesn't know that falling for her could break me all over again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, before the question, before the flood, before everything changed. Let me tell you how I learned to live in silence. Silence became my survival strategy, the way some people learn to live with chronic pain. You don't cure it, you just build your life around it. My apartment was a testament to that philosophy. Minimal furniture, neutral colors, everything designed to be felt as little as possible. The walls were eggshell white, not because I liked white, but because white meant nothing. It demanded nothing. My couch was gray. My curtains were gray. Even the artwork, 2 generic prints of geometric shapes, were rendered in shades of gray and beige. I worked from home as a data analyst, which was perfect. Numbers didn't ask questions. Spreadsheets didn't expect vulnerability. I could spend entire days speaking to no one, my fingers moving across the keyboard in a rhythm that felt safe and predictable. Video calls were rare, and when they happened, I kept my camera off. Technical difficulties. I'd type in the chat, and no one ever pushed. The silence wasn't loneliness, I told myself. It was protection. 3 years ago, I learned that loving a woman could destroy you in ways I hadn't known were possible. Her name was Rachel, and she had entered my life like a summer storm, sudden, overwhelming, beautiful. For 18 months, I believed I had found something rare. She told me she loved me in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, her hand trembling as she reached across the table. We built a small, secret world together. Private jokes. Shared playlists. Her perfume on my pillowcases. Then she left. Not because she stopped caring, she said, but because she needed to figure things out. 6 months later, I saw her engagement photos on social media. She was marrying a man named Derek. When I finally gathered the courage to call her, to ask her what we had been, she laughed. Not cruelly, but casually, which was somehow worse. At least we had fun. But it was just a phase, you know? I'm not actually. I'm not like you. Not like you. Those 3 words carved out something in my chest that never grew back. So I built a new life. A careful one. A quiet one. I stopped going to places where I might meet women who looked at me too long. I stopped listening to the music Rachel and I had loved. I stopped wearing the cologne she said smelled like cedar and rain. I became a person who existed in beige and gray, and I told myself it was enough. When I decided I needed a roommate to help with rent, I was meticulous. I interviewed 7 people. I asked pointed questions. I looked for someone who would be safe, someone whose presence wouldn't threaten the careful numbness I'd cultivated. That's how I found Sophia. She arrived for the apartment viewing on a Sunday afternoon in early September, carrying a canvas tote bag with paint stains and a worn copy of a book about Italian Renaissance art. She wore a cream-colored sweater that looked soft, jeans with a small tear at the knee, and no makeup except for a touch of something that made her lips look like she'd been eating berries. "Hi," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm Sophia. Thank you for meeting with me." I let her in, watching as she moved through the space with careful attention. She didn't gush or perform enthusiasm. She simply observed, running her fingers along the windowsill, checking the light, opening the cabinets in the kitchen with a gentle touch. "It's peaceful here," she said after a while, and something about the way she said peaceful instead of nice or great made me relax slightly. We sat at my small dining table, and I asked my prepared questions. She was 26, 2 years younger than me. She was finishing her master's in art history. She didn't smoke, didn't have pets, kept regular hours. She liked quiet. She liked order. "I'm not really a party person," she said, almost apologetically. "I spend most of my time reading or painting. I make tea at night. I hope that's okay." "That's perfect," I said, and I meant it. But the detail that sealed it, the thing that made me certain Sophia was safe, came near the end of our conversation. "There's this guy in my seminar," she said, her cheeks coloring slightly. "He keeps leaving books on my desk. Victorian poetry. I think he's trying to impress me." A guy. She liked a guy. She was straight. Relief washed over me so completely I almost smiled. "Are you interested?" I asked, keeping my tone polite and neutral. Sophia shrugged, looking down at her hands. "I don't know yet. Maybe. He seems sweet. Perfect. Utterly, completely perfect." Sophia moved in 2 weeks later with only 5 boxes, a suitcase, and an easel. She set up her room with the same quiet thoughtfulness she'd shown during the viewing. I helped her carry things upstairs, and we worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The first month was exactly what I needed. We existed in parallel, 2 people sharing space but not lives. Sophia kept her areas tidy. She always did her dishes. She asked before using my things. In the mornings, she made coffee and left enough for me in the pot. In the evenings, she painted in her room with the door cracked open, and sometimes I could smell the faint turpentine and linseed oil, which reminded me of art museums. We'd pass each other in the hallway, exchange small smiles, and continue on our separate paths. She mentioned the seminar guy a few more times, Tom, his name was, and each mention reinforced the safety I felt around her. Sophia was kind, creative, clearly heterosexual, and entirely unthreatening to the careful walls I'd built. I started to relax in ways I hadn't allowed myself to in years. I worked at the dining table, sometimes instead of hiding in my room. I made pasta one night and offered her some. We ate together, talking about her research on Caravaggio and my latest project involving financial forecasting models. The conversation was pleasant, intellectual, safe. I told myself this was good. This was healing, even sharing space with another person without fear. But I made sure never to let her get too close. I didn't ask about her family or her dreams. I didn't share stories from my past. We kept things surface level, friendly but distant, and that distance felt like the only thing protecting me from falling apart again. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late October. Sophia had been living with me for nearly 2 months, and I'd grown comfortable in our careful distance. I thought I was safe. Rain hammered against the windows and sheets, the kind of storm that makes you grateful to be indoors. I was on the couch with my laptop, reviewing spreadsheets, while Sophia sat in the armchair across from me, sketching something in a small notebook. The apartment was warm. The lamp cast soft yellow light across the room. It was peaceful in a way that almost felt dangerous, the kind of peace that makes you forget to keep your guard up. Sophia had been quiet for the past hour, her pencil moving in soft scratches across the paper. I'd glanced at her a few times, noting the concentration on her face, the way she bit her lower lip when she was focused. Then, without looking up from her sketch, she spoke. "Elise, can I ask you something personal?" My fingers froze on the keyboard. Personal questions weren't part of our arrangement. We didn't do personal. "Sure," I said carefully, my chest already tightening. She set down her pencil and looked at me directly. Her eyes were dark in the lamplight, serious and searching. "What does a woman taste like?" The room tilted. For a moment, I was certain I'd misheard her. The rain was loud. Maybe she'd asked something else. Maybe she'd said waste or haste or anything other than taste. But she was still looking at me, waiting, and I realized with creeping horror that I'd heard her perfectly. "What?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophia didn't look embarrassed or playful. She looked genuinely curious, the way someone might ask about a country they'd never visited or a food they'd never tried. "I mean, when you kiss a woman, when you're intimate with her, what does it feel like? What does she taste like?" She paused, then added quietly, "I've been wondering." My laptop nearly slid off my knees. I caught it, closed it, set it aside with shaking hands. This couldn't be happening. Sophia was straight. She liked Tom. She talked about Tom. She was safe. "Why are you asking me that?" I heard myself say, and I hated how defensive I sounded. "Because you'd know," Sophia said simply. "And I'm trying to understand something." Understand what? She looked down at her hands, her expression shifting into something more vulnerable. Whether what I'm feeling is real or just curiosity. The world narrowed to the space between us. The rain. The lamplight. Her words hanging in the air like smoke. I started, then stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I can't answer that. Why not? Because I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my water glass. Because that's not something I talk about. With anyone. Especially not. I caught myself before I said especially not with you. Sophia stood too, more slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I just thought, since we live together, and you've been so kind, that maybe I could ask you something I can't ask anyone else. Ask Tom, I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. Ask your seminar guy with the poetry books. Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe, or hurt. Tom doesn't know me, she said quietly. Not really. But you. I thought you might understand. I grabbed my laptop and my phone, clutching them against my chest like a shield. I need to go to bed. Elise. Good night, Sophia. I walked to my room on legs that felt like water, closed the door, and locked it. Then I sat on the edge of my bed in the darkness, trying to breathe. What does a woman taste like? The question circled in my mind, relentless. It wasn't asked with flirtation or seduction. It was asked with the same careful curiosity Sophia brought to everything. Her art, her research, her life. But that made it worse. Because it meant she was serious. It meant she was questioning. And questioning meant exploration. And exploration meant I couldn't finish the thought. I'd been so sure she was safe. So certain that her straightness was a barrier that would keep me from ever feeling anything dangerous. But now that barrier was crumbling, and beneath it was something terrifying. The possibility that Sophia wasn't what I'd thought. That she was curious. That she might want to experiment. And I knew exactly how that story ended. Rachel had been curious once too. Rachel had wanted to explore. And when she was done exploring, she'd left me shattered. I couldn't survive that again. I wouldn't. For the next 4 days, I avoided Sophia like she carried a contagious disease. I woke early and left for coffee shops to work, even though I hated working in public. I came home late, slipping into the apartment quietly, listening for signs of her presence. If I heard her in the kitchen, I'd wait in my room until she left. If I heard her painting, I'd stay silent, barely breathing, until I was sure she was absorbed in her work. We didn't speak. We barely saw each other. I told myself I was protecting us both. She needed space to figure out her feelings without me complicating things, and I needed distance before I did something catastrophically stupid, like letting myself hope. But avoiding her was harder than I expected. The apartment felt different without our small interactions. The coffee pot sat empty in the mornings. The space felt colder, lonelier. Sometimes I'd find little signs of her. A mug in the sink, a book left on the coffee table, the faint smell of her chamomile tea, and I'd feel a longing so sharp it scared me. On the 5th day, a Friday, I came home late from a coffee shop, exhausted and ready to hide in my room. I opened the door and immediately heard something wrong. Water. Running water. Not from the shower or the sink, but wrong. Too loud, too constant. I rushed toward the sound and found Sophia in the kitchen, surrounded by chaos. Water was pouring from beneath the sink, flooding across the tile floor in an expanding pool. Sophia was on her knees in the middle of it, her jeans soaked, her hair falling out of its bun, her hands working frantically with a wrench under the sink. What happened? I dropped my bag and rushed forward. The pipe, she grunted, twisting the wrench hard, burst. I came home and found it like this. I called the landlord, but he won't be here until tomorrow. I'm trying to shut off the water main, but the valve is stuck. I knelt beside her in the water, not caring that it soaked through my pants immediately. Let me help. There's a bucket under the sink in the bathroom, she said, not looking at me, still wrestling with the wrench. We need to catch as much as we can. I ran, grabbed the bucket, came back. We worked together in frantic silence, Sophia finally getting the valve turned enough to slow the flow, me scooping water and dumping it in the sink, both of us moving towels, pushing furniture out of the way. It took 30 minutes to get the situation under control. When the immediate crisis passed, we sat back on the wet floor, breathing hard, soaked and exhausted. Sophia's hands were shaking. There was a smudge of rust on her cheek. Her sweater clung to her, and her dark hair stuck to her neck. She looked at me, and for the first time in 5 days, our eyes met. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Of course." We stayed there, sitting in the water, and something shifted. The fear that had driven me away felt smaller, less powerful than it had in my room alone. Here, in the mess and the crisis, we were just two people trying to fix something broken. "I'm sorry," Sophia said after a moment. "For the other night. I shouldn't have asked you that. It wasn't fair." "It's okay," I heard myself say, even though it wasn't, even though I'd spent 5 days hiding from her. "No, it's not." She looked down at her wet hands. "I made you uncomfortable. I crossed a line. I didn't know who else to talk to." The vulnerability in her voice cracked something in my chest. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did you think you could ask me?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns in the water on the floor. "Because you're the only person who's ever made me feel like it's okay not to have all the answers," she said finally. "You don't perform or pretend. You just are. And I thought maybe you'd understand what it's like to question things you thought you knew about yourself." The honesty of it stunned me into silence. We sat there as the water soaked through our clothes, and slowly, carefully, I felt the wall between us beginning to crack. "We should clean this up," Sophia said eventually, standing and offering me her hand. I took it. Her palm was warm and solid against mine. We spent the next hour mopping, laying out towels, moving everything out of the kitchen. We worked side by side, our movements falling into an easy rhythm. When we finished, the kitchen was damp but manageable, and we were both exhausted. "I'm going to change," Sophia said, heading toward her room. "And then I think I need tea. Do you want some?" I should have said no. I should have retreated to my room, reinforced the walls, protected myself. Instead, I said, "Yes. Please." 20 minutes later, we sat on the couch in dry clothes. Sophia in soft sleep pants and an oversized sweatshirt, me in leggings and an old t-shirt. She'd made chamomile tea, and we held our mugs, the steam rising between us. "The landlord said the kitchen will be out of commission for at least 3 days while they fix the pipes and replace the damaged cabinet," Sophia said, staring into her tea. "No sink. No dishwasher. We'll figure it out," I said. She looked at me, something uncertain in her expression. "We." I met her eyes. "Yeah, we." A small smile touched her lips, and I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. Something warm and terrifying and entirely too much like hope. We sat in silence, drinking our tea, and for the first time in 5 days, the apartment felt like home again. But as I looked at Sophia in the lamplight, her damp hair curling around her face, her hands wrapped around her mug, her eyes soft and thoughtful, I felt the truth I'd been running from settle over me like a weight. I was in trouble, because somewhere between the flooded kitchen and the chamomile tea, between her impossible question and her genuine apology, I'd stopped seeing Sophia as my safe, straight roommate. I'd started seeing her as a woman. A beautiful, thoughtful, complicated woman. And that terrified me more than anything. That night with chamomile tea was just the beginning. What I didn't know then was that the broken pipe had cracked open something far more significant than our kitchen floor. It had created a space where silence could no longer protect me. The next 3 days without a functioning kitchen forced us into a closeness I hadn't anticipated. We couldn't avoid each other anymore. We had to coordinate meals, share the bathroom sink for washing dishes, navigate the small space of our apartment with the kitchen blocked off by the landlord's plastic sheeting and industrial fans running constantly to dry out the water damage. On Saturday morning, I woke to find Sophia already up, sitting at the dining table with her laptop and a bowl of cereal. She looked up when I emerged from my room, and for a second, I saw hesitation cross her face. like she wasn't sure if I'd retreat again. "Morning," she said carefully. "Morning." I moved toward the coffee maker, then remembered it was in the kitchen, inaccessible behind the plastic barrier. "Right. No coffee." I picked some up from the cafe on the corner. Sophia gestured to a paper cup beside her. "I got you one too. Black, right? That's how you usually take it." She'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. Sophia noticed everything. The way light fell through windows, the composition of Renaissance paintings, apparently the way I took my coffee. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. I sat across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She returned to her laptop, but I could feel her awareness of me. The way the air between us felt different now, charged with something unspoken. We worked in silence for a while, her typing notes for her thesis, me reviewing data models. It should have felt awkward, but instead it felt almost comfortable, like we were settling into a new rhythm. Around noon, Sophia closed her laptop and stretched. "I'm starving. Want to go grab lunch somewhere?" The question felt loaded. Going out together, sharing a meal in public. It felt like crossing another line, stepping further from roommates and closer to something else. "Sure," I said, before I could overthink it. We ended up at a small Thai restaurant 2 blocks away, tucked into a corner booth while rain pattered against the windows. Sophia ordered pad thai and I got green curry, and we shared spring rolls between us. "Tell me about your thesis," I said, wanting to fill the silence with something safe. Sophia's face brightened immediately. "It's about the use of light and shadow in Baroque painting. Specifically how artists like Caravaggio used chiaroscuro not just as technique, but as emotional language. The way darkness and light interact can tell you everything about a painting's meaning." She talked about it with such passion, her hands moving to illustrate points, her eyes alive with enthusiasm. I found myself genuinely captivated, not just by the subject, but by her. The way she saw the world in layers and meanings, the way she found beauty in contrasts. "What about you?" she asked, popping a spring roll into her mouth. "Do you like your work? Data analysis seems so different from art." I considered the question. I like that it's predictable. Numbers follow rules. There's always a right answer if you look hard enough. But doesn't that get boring? Always knowing what to expect. "No," I said quietly. "It feels safe." Sophia studied me for a long moment, and I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. She didn't push, didn't ask the obvious follow-up questions. Instead, she just nodded and said, "I can see that." We walked home slowly despite the rain, sharing Sophia's umbrella. Our shoulders brushed with each step, and I was hyper-aware of every point of contact. Her arm against mine, the occasional bump of our hips, the way we had to stay close to both fit under the small canopy. Back at the apartment, we fell into an easy routine. We'd work separately during the day, then come together in the evening. We ordered takeout and ate on the couch, watching old movies on Sophia's laptop. We talked about small things, her favorite museums, my college years, the books we'd both read. But we avoided the big things. I didn't ask about Tom, the seminar guy she'd mentioned before. She didn't bring up her question from that night. We existed in a careful bubble, and I told myself that was fine. Except I was lying to myself, and I knew it. Because every time Sophia laughed at something on screen, I felt it in my chest. Every time she fell asleep on the couch and I covered her with a blanket, I had to resist the urge to brush the hair from her face. Every time I caught her looking at me with that thoughtful, studying expression, I wondered what she saw. On Monday evening, 3 days into our kitchen exile, Sophia was painting in her room while I tried to work at the dining table. I couldn't concentrate. The numbers on my screen blurred together, meaningless. I found myself standing at her door instead, watching her work. She had a canvas set up on her easel, and she was painting something abstract, swirls of deep blues and purples with bursts of gold. Her hair was piled on top of her head, secured with a paintbrush. She wore an old button-down shirt covered in paint stains, and there was a smudge of cobalt blue on her jaw. She looked beautiful. The thought hit me with such force that I had to grab the doorframe. "Hey," she said, noticing me. She set down her brush and smiled. "Taking a break?" "Yeah." My voice came out rougher than intended. "What are you painting?" "I'm not sure yet. Sometimes I just start with color and see where it takes me." She stepped back from the canvas, tilting her head. "I've been thinking a lot about storms lately. The way they're destructive but also necessary. How they clear the air." I understood she wasn't just talking about weather. "Can I come in?" I asked. "Of course." I stepped into her room for the first time since she'd moved in. It was completely different from mine. Warm where mine was stark, colorful where mine was gray. Books were stacked on every surface. Paintings in various stages of completion leaned against the walls. Strings of soft lights hung around her window. It smelled like paint and tea and something floral. Her shampoo, maybe, or her laundry detergent. It felt alive in a way my room didn't. "I like your space," I said. "Thanks. It's a bit chaotic, I know." "No. It's honest." Sophia looked at me curiously. "Honest? It shows who you are." "Mine just shows who I'm trying not to be." The words surprised us both. I didn't usually say things like that. True things, vulnerable things. Sophia moved to her bed and sat down, patting the space beside her. After a moment's hesitation, I joined her. "Elise," she said gently, "can I ask you something? And you can tell me if I'm overstepping again." My heart rate spiked, but I nodded. "Why do you live like you're trying to disappear?" I looked down at my hands, feeling exposed. "It's easier that way." "Easier than what?" "Than feeling things. Than wanting things I can't have." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Someone hurt you badly, didn't they?" The tears came without warning, hot and sudden. I tried to blink them back, but one escaped, trailing down my cheek. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't usually." "Hey." Sophia's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "It's okay. You don't have to explain." But suddenly I wanted to. After 3 years of silence, I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to tell her. Her name was Rachel. I began, my voice shaking. We were together for 18 months. I really thought it was real. That she loved me the way I loved her. Sophia listened without interrupting, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. She left because she needed to figure things out. 6 months later, she was engaged to a man. When I asked her about us, about what we'd had, she told me it was just a phase. That she wasn't like me. I laughed bitterly. I was an experiment. A curiosity. Something she tried and then discarded when she was done. Elise. So when you asked me that question about what a woman tastes like, I looked at Sophia finally, letting her see the fear in my eyes. All I could think was that you were curious too. That you wanted to experiment. And I knew I couldn't survive being someone's phase again. Understanding washed over Sophia's face, followed by something that looked like pain. "Is that what you think?" she asked quietly. "That I see you as an experiment? I don't know what to think. You talked about Tom. You said you were trying to understand if what you were feeling was real or just curiosity. What else am I supposed to think?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her hand still holding mine. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "Tom asked me out last week," she said. I said no. I stared at her. "Why?" "Because I realized I was talking about him to convince myself of something that wasn't true. I thought if I said it enough, that I liked a guy, that I was interested in him, it would become real. But it never did." She turned to face me fully. "I asked you that question because I've been confused for months. Maybe years. I've been trying to understand feelings I've been taught not to have, attractions I've been told aren't possible for me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she must be able to hear it. But I'm not curious about women in general, Elise. I'm not trying to experiment or explore some abstract concept." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "I'm trying to understand what I feel for you." The words hung in the air between us, enormous and terrifying and impossibly beautiful. "Sophia, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt. And I know I probably shouldn't have said anything, but I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of painting around the truth instead of just showing it. I should have pulled away. I should have protected myself, reinforced the walls, chosen safety over risk. Instead, I asked, what truth? Sophia's eyes held mine, dark and certain. That every time you walk into a room, I forget what I was doing. That I make extra coffee in the morning because I love the way you look when you're surprised by small kindnesses. That I've started painting in colors I've never used before because being around you makes the world feel less gray. A sob caught in my throat. Please don't say things like that if you don't mean them. I mean every word. She raised her free hand to my face, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched my cheek. I'm not Rachel. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide this was a phase. This isn't curiosity. She stopped, struggling for words. It's what? I whispered. It's the first real thing I've ever felt. We sat there, her hand on my face, our fingers still intertwined. The world narrowed to the space between us and the truth we were both terrified to speak. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice breaking. I'm so scared of this. I know. So am I. Sophia's thumb brushed across my cheekbone, catching a tear. But I think staying silent might be scarier. Before I could respond, before I could talk myself out of it or rebuild my walls, my phone rang. The sound shattered the moment. I pulled away instinctively, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand where I'd set it down. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Rachel. Sophia saw my face change. Who is it? I need to take this. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked out of the room, answering as I reached the hallway. Hello. Elise. Oh my God, it's so good to hear your voice. Rachel sounded bright, cheerful, like we were old friends catching up. Like she hadn't destroyed me. What do you want, Rachel? Wow, okay, hostile. I just wanted to call and let you know I'm going to be in town next week. I thought maybe we could grab coffee. Catch up. Catch up, I repeated flatly. Yeah. I mean, it's been 3 years? I'd love to hear what you've been up to. And I wanted to tell you in person. Derek and I are expecting. I'm pregnant. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. She was pregnant. She was building a whole life, a legitimate life, while I was still trying to remember how to breathe around the damage she'd caused. Congratulations, I managed. Thank you. I'm so happy, Elise. Everything finally feels right, you know? Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She paused, and when she spoke again, her tone shifted to something almost condescending. I know things ended weirdly between us, but I hope you've moved on too. I hope you found whatever it is you were looking for. Whatever it is you were looking for. Like my wanting to love her had been some kind of abstract quest, not a real, devastating feeling. You told me I was a phase, I said, my voice shaking. You said what we had wasn't real. Rachel sighed, like I was being dramatic. Elise, come on. We had fun, but we were both young. I was figuring myself out. Surely you understand that. Figuring yourself out? Rachel, you told me you loved me. You said I was the best thing that ever happened to you. And I meant it. At the time. But people change. People grow up and realize what they actually want versus what they thought they wanted when they were confused. I felt something break inside me, some last fragile hope that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it had meant something to her after all. So I was just confusion, I said. That's all I was to you. You're being really unfair right now. I called to be nice, to reconnect, and you're turning this into. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, and I sank down beside it, my back against the wall, my whole body trembling. The tears came in waves, 3 years of grief and anger and betrayal finally breaking through the careful numbness I'd maintained. I'd convinced myself I was over it, that I'd healed, but Rachel's voice had ripped open every wound I'd tried to close. Just a phase. Confusion. Not real. I heard footsteps, and then Sophia was there, kneeling in front of me. Elise? What happened? I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, sobbing, feeling pathetic and broken and so impossibly tired of hurting. Sophia didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms, holding me as I fell apart. We stayed there on the hallway floor, me crying into her shoulder, her arms steady and strong around me, whispering things I couldn't quite hear but felt in my bones. Safe things. True things. When the worst of it passed, when I could breathe again, I pulled back slightly, wiping at my face. "I'm sorry," I said. Don't apologize." Sophia's hands cupped my face, forcing me to look at her. "Who was that?" "Rachel. My ex. The one who—" My voice broke again. "She's pregnant. She's happy. She wanted to grab coffee and catch up like we're old friends. Like she didn't tell me I was just a phase she was going through." Anger flashed across Sophia's face, quick and fierce. "She said that to you?" "She reminded me, yeah. She said she was young and confused and figuring herself out. That what we had wasn't real to her. But it was real to you." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. God, it was so real to me. Sophia's thumbs brushed away my tears, her touch impossibly gentle. Then it was real. Period. Her inability to see that, to honor what you shared, that's her failure, Elise. Not yours. But what if? I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the fear that had haunted me for 3 years. What if what? What if she was right? What if I was just something she tried? What if that's all I'll ever be to anyone? Sophia's eyes blazed. "Listen to me. You are not an experiment. You are not a phase. You are not something people try and discard." Her voice shook with emotion. "You are a real person with real feelings, and anyone who treats you as anything less is a coward who doesn't deserve you." I stared at her, stunned by the ferocity in her voice. "And for the record," Sophia continued, her hands still cradling my face, "what I feel for you isn't confusion. It isn't curiosity. It's not me trying to figure myself out at your expense." "Then what is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Sophia leaned forward until our foreheads touched, her breath warm against my lips. "It's me falling for someone who makes me understand why people write poems and paint portraits. It's me realizing that every relationship I've tried to have with men felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit because I was trying to be someone I'm not. It's me finally understanding what it means to want someone so badly it hurts." She pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "It's me choosing you, Elise. Not experimenting. Not exploring. Choosing." The kiss happened like gravity, inevitable, necessary, right? Her lips met mine, soft and tentative, asking a question. I answered by pulling her closer, by opening my mouth against hers, by letting 3 years of silence break into something loud and alive and terrifyingly beautiful. She tasted like chamomile tea and rain and something sweet I couldn't name. Her hands slid into my hair, and I gripped her waist, pulling her into my lap there on the hallway floor, not caring about anything except the feeling of her against me, real and solid and choosing me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia rested her forehead against mine. "I'm still scared," I whispered. "Me too." She smiled, small and genuine. "But I think I want to be scared with you more than I want to be safe without you." I let out a laugh that was half sob, overwhelmed by the truth of it. That safety had started to feel like loneliness, that silence had become its own kind of pain. "Stay with me tonight?" I asked, the words coming out before I could second-guess them. Sophia nodded, then stood and offered me her hand. We walked to my room, the gray, colorless room I'd built to feel nothing in, and suddenly it felt different. Sophia's presence changed it, the way light changes a painting. We climbed into my bed, still fully clothed, and she pulled me against her. I rested my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat, steady and sure. "Tell me something true," I said into the darkness. Sophia's fingers traced patterns on my back. "I started painting storms because of you. Because you seemed like you were living through one. All that silence, all that careful control. It felt like you were trying to hold back something massive. And I wanted to understand it. To capture it." She paused. "But also because being around you made me feel like I was in a storm too. Like everything I thought I knew about myself was being rearranged." I tilted my head up to look at her. Even in the darkness, I could see her eyes, soft and honest. My grandmother used to say that sometimes you don't wait for color to come back into your life. Sophia continued. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. You have to pick up a brush and paint it into existence, even when everything feels gray. Is that what you're doing? I asked. Creating color? I'm trying. She smiled. Are you? I thought about it, about the past 3 years of gray walls and silent rooms, of protection that had become its own kind of prison. About how Sophia had walked into my carefully controlled life and made me feel things I'd sworn I'd never feel again. I want to, I said. I'm just not sure I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. Sophia kissed my forehead. No expectations. No timeline. Just honesty. Can you do that? I can try. That's enough. We fell asleep like that, tangled together in my gray room. And when I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window, Sophia was still there. She was awake, propped up on one elbow, watching me with a soft expression. Morning, she whispered. Morning. I reached up and touched her face, needing to confirm she was real. You're still here. Where else would I be? I didn't answer. I just pulled her down and kissed her, slow and deep, tasting the promise of something I'd thought was lost forever. When we finally got out of bed, Sophia made tea while I opened the windows. Cool air rushed in, fresh and clean, and I noticed something I hadn't seen in years. The world outside wasn't gray. The sky was blue. The trees were green. Someone had planted red flowers in a window box across the street. Color. Everywhere. Like it had been there all along, just waiting for me to look. Sophia came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her chin on my shoulder. The landlord texted, she said. Kitchen will be fixed by tomorrow. Good. Things will go back to normal. I turned in her arms, meeting her eyes. I don't want normal. Normal was lonely. Sophia smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. Then what do you want? I thought about the question, really thought about it. For 3 years, I'd wanted safety. I'd wanted numbness. I'd wanted to never feel pain again. But standing there with Sophia, with color bleeding back into my world and hope unfurling in my chest like something growing toward light, I realized I wanted something different. I want to try, I said. I want to risk it. I want to see what happens when I stop hiding. Even though it's scary? Especially because it's scary. I kissed her softly. Because the scariest thing isn't loving someone who might hurt me. It's realizing I almost missed this because I was too afraid to try. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. So what do we do now? I took her hand, lacing our fingers together. I think we start painting. Together. And we see what colors we create. She laughed, pulling me close, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. I felt home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the choice to be vulnerable. In the terrifying, beautiful risk of letting someone see all of me and trusting they'd stay. We stood there in the morning light, holding each other, and I understood something fundamental. Silence had never protected me. It had only preserved my pain. But Sophia with her questions and her honesty and her gentle insistence on truth, she had shown me something different. That love doesn't have to destroy you. That being seen doesn't have to mean being abandoned. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself feel again, even when you're terrified of the outcome. I'd spent 3 years in gray, convinced it was the only way to survive. But Sophia had walked into my life with paint-stained hands and impossible questions, and she'd reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Sometimes you don't wait for color to return. Sometimes you create it yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone comes along who wants to paint with you, who sees your storms and doesn't run, who asks the hard questions and waits for real answers, who chooses you not as an experiment or a phase, but as a person worth knowing, worth loving, worth staying for. As we stood there in my once gray apartment, now filled with morning light and the promise of something new, I realized the silence had finally broken. And in its place was something louder, messier, infinitely more beautiful. Hope. Real, terrifying, color-filled hope. And for the first time in 3 years, I was ready to see where it led. I don't know what happens next for Sophia and me. I don't know if love will be easy or if I'll stop being scared. But I know I'm done living in gray. I'm done choosing silence over risk. If you've ever built walls to protect your heart, if you've ever been someone's phase, or if you're trying to find the courage to feel again, I hope my story reminds you that it's possible. That healing doesn't mean forgetting. That sometimes the person who asks the hardest questions is the one who helps you find your way back to color. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you don't have to wait for life to become beautiful again. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to create it yourself.